Our current VP, I think this is her third round in 2 years fighting cancer. She's 70 years old. And by all accounts, she shouldn't be working. But because she hasn't produced enough wealth in her lifetime, she has to work. And this 70-year-old woman who's been fighting cancer, you try to send her to a department, I'm not to a department, I'm sorry, that you know that she's gonna fail in. And that's why we fight Amazon so hard.
Welcome to On Strike, a production of Workers Strike Back. I'm Kshama Sawant. This week, I have the pleasure of introducing a new co-host on our program, Kaylin Nicholson. Our viewers will recognize Kaylin as a Workers Strike Back activist whom we've interviewed in several previous episodes. Welcome, Kaylin.
Thanks, Kshama. I'm really excited to be joining the On Strike team.
This week, we'll be hearing from independent union organizers from the Amazon distribution facility RDU1 in Garner, North Carolina. Emily MacArthur, our co-host, and Margot Stewart, our cinematographer, interviewed them last week here in Seattle in front of the Amazon headquarters. The independent union is called CAUSE, Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment.
In the fight to unionize the Amazon Behemoth, there are two major paths being taken. One path is to organize as an independent union. This is what we're seeing in the North Carolina facility. And the other route is to organize through an existing major union like the Teamsters or RWDSU. The Teamsters are the second largest union in the United States. Our viewers may be aware of the Teamsters UPS contract struggle last year, which led to some significant gains for the union, though we think more could have been won had the union carried out a strong strike, which many workers were prepared to do, instead of avoiding a strike. Of course, we did see UAW, which is also a big union, carry out a historic strike of auto workers last year, as well as the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, all of which won important gains and which we have covered in previous on-strike episodes. The Teamsters potentially have a very important role to play in the fight to unionize Amazon. They already have the most central position in the logistics industry of any union. They've shown they were prepared to go on strike to successfully unionize facilities, as they did in Kentucky at the DHL facility across the street from Amazon's KCVG air hub. There are strong arguments for those already fighting to unionize Amazon to work closely with the Teamsters, and for some unionization drives to go through the Teamsters. Another existing union organizing at Amazon is RWDSU, which is organizing the BHM1 facility in Bessemer, Alabama. RWDSU is not large in and of itself, but it's part of a very large union called UFCW, which has over 1.2 million members in the US and Canada. There are serious pros and cons to both routes, whether independent union or existing big union. Unionizing Amazon is a key task of the working class in this era, and it will not be easy by either path. But the question of what are the best strategies and tactics to win are critical questions that have to be taken seriously.
As we've discussed many times on this show, the leadership of most of the established unions at present are not prepared to fight the bosses in the way that's needed. To make this historic breakthrough and rebuild the labor movement in the US, we need a return to the class struggle methods that built the labor movement in the first place, based on strong demands, rank and file organizing, democratic structures, on actively building wider working class solidarity, and being prepared to use worker power, most importantly by preparing for and carrying out strong strikes that can shut down the boss's profits. All of this needs to be rooted in the understanding that we cannot collaborate with the bosses, that anything we win will be wrenched from their hands by the force of worker organizing and strike action. Under capitalism, which is a fundamentally bankrupt system, workers have had to fight tooth and nail for everything we have won, and the bosses have viciously fought against even the most modest demands. In fact, historically, they have fired, injured, or even murdered countless workers simply for organizing, and all this to defend their profits, wealth, and dictatorial control over the workplace and over society's resources. At Amazon right now, a brutal union-busting campaign is taking place. Workers are being fired, intimidated, and threatened for supporting unionization efforts, including making immigrant workers fearful of deportation. Unfortunately, the main union leadership in the US at present is not prepared to go toe to toe with the bosses, but seeks instead to make peace with them and generally avoids going on strike at all costs. And this same leadership is, not accidentally, thoroughly pro capitalist. The major breakthroughs in the labor movement in the past, including the unionizing of the auto industry, took place largely under the leadership of socialists and communists. In this context, choosing to go with a major union means often having to struggle with the top union leadership in an ongoing fight for the best strategies and tactics in order to have a chance to defeat the bosses. In fact, the campaign to unionize the BHM-1 Amazon facility in Bessemer, Alabama, has lost 2 elections, though the second is still under review by the National Labor Relations Board due to Amazon's blatantly illegal actions during the election, which could lead to a third election at the facility. Unfortunately, these setbacks have happened despite the initial courageous efforts by the workers to stand up to the bosses. This is because of the mistaken approach taken by the RWDSU leadership, running a campaign that, among other things, did not build a rank and file organizing committee and base inside the facility that could fight the company directly in the warehouses, relying instead on professional paid staffers, and also failing to clarify concrete demands, which allowed Amazon to demonize the union as not standing for anything, falsely claiming that they just wanted to take union dues from the workers. Given these realities, it could seem straightforward to choose the route of independent unions instead of going through the big unions. But it's not that simple, unfortunately.
That's because there are also major obstacles to being an independent union. Unionizing Amazon will require wider support in the labor movement. It's very unlikely that an isolated, independent union at one facility alone can win both a union election and a first contract. Amazon is the second biggest corporation in the world, and it will take wider working-class support to defeat it. There was the first successful union election at Amazon at JFK 8 on Staten Island 2 years ago this month. This was a historic victory, but since then, there has not been success at bringing Amazon to the negotiating table to win a first contract. We think that a strong strike with wider support in the labor movement would have to be carried out at JFK 8 or at any Amazon facility to win a first contract. And the solidarity needed to carry out that strong strike and make it effective would include the agreement of other workers not to cross the picket line and, for example, not to deliver Amazon's packages from that facility. The Teamsters at UPS are some of those package delivery drivers. And to get a sense of the scale of things, it would probably require something like $1 million a day in strike funds to shut down an Amazon facility. This would also require much wider solidarity in the labor movement than an independent union could likely manage alone.
We do need independent unions and new unions, but we should remember that the biggest steps forward in the labor movement generally went through the big existing unions, not small independent ones, and this will require building a base of militant, left-wing, rank-and-file caucuses in these unions. The militant union members will also need to fight against the current leadership, much of which is tied at the hip to the Democratic Party. Instead, workers will need to fight for a new party for working people. This year, it means union members saying no to Trump and Biden and urging that unions refuse to endorse either or to rescind the endorsements already made of either. Independent unions have also at times played an important role historically, as they did recently in the first election victory at Amazon at JFK 8. Of course, leading an independent union struggle does not preclude coordinating with or later affiliating to existing broader union structures and fighting for militant tactics there. These are hard questions facing the working class. KCVG in Kentucky, which we've covered in On Strike previously, has been organizing an independent union, but it should be noted that KCVG workers are now working closely with the Teamsters. We hope we can go back to KCVG soon in an upcoming episode to hear about these and other developments from the workers there. Regardless of whether a given unionization effort at Amazon goes through a big union or establishes an independent union, the key to success will be a strong, rank-and-file-led, class struggle-based campaign that is not afraid to directly take on the bosses, to organize around strong demands, and to prepare to go on strike. We'll talk more about these and other questions of strategy in today's interview as well as in upcoming episodes.
But before we continue, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel and become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure that we can continue to organize to rebuild a fighting labor movement. By becoming a Workers Strike Back member, you can also help On Strike continue to bring you coverage of a wide range of issues from a working class perspective you won't find on mainstream media. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. Now we'll be talking with Reverend Ryan Brown and Italo Medelius from CAUSE, who are the elected president and secretary of the union, respectively. And we'll talk about the fight to unionize Amazon and explain why they chose to launch an independent union in North Carolina.
Thanks so much, guys, for sitting down with us today. I wonder if you can just sort of start out introducing yourselves and talking a little bit about how CAUSE came about and what's been the focus of your work.
Okay, I'll answer the very first part of your question. My name is Reverend Ryan Brown. I'm an Amazon worker in Garner, North Carolina. I'm the president of CAUSE, Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment. Very long name. Our organizing efforts started in the middle of the pandemic. I was asked to go to a part of the warehouse that was a hotspot for COVID. I refused to go. That didn't sit well with my spirit. I expressed myself best by writing. I wrote our general manager a very long letter, posted it to the virtual platform called The Voice of the Associate, and I had a 1 hour meeting with him. And to be very honest with you, he was just giving me a lot of corporate bullshit, insulting my intelligence. I left that meeting frustrated, angry, upset, went back home and prayed. And the answer that I received in my prayer was to organize. And here we are 2 years later, growing and still going.
My name is Italo Medelius. I'm the secretary for CAUSE, and I'm a ship dock worker. So people always ask, what does a ship dock worker do? And especially a ship dock water spider. So the ship dock is exactly what it sounds like, right? Like you're loading things into the trailers for packages to go out. And a water spider, I always like to describe that as the pack mules of Amazon. So we always, we grab essentially all the carts where all the packages are in, super heavy carts, and we essentially drag them into the trailers. I have been tracking, my steps that I take every day. It's about 22 miles on average that we walk a day. So, on top of our jobs as Amazon workers, it's also a full-time job to organize a union because we're an independent union, right? We are our own officers. So the people that work at Amazon are also the ones that own our union, and we run our union. So we're excited to be here, and thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I mean, actually a question that's flowing out of this for me is it's really notable to me that you mentioned that you have elected positions in your union, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that came about, like to have those structures in place.
Well, we're 100% a democratic institution and an organization. It's not a dictatorship. It's not a two-man show. We actually take the time to listen to what workers say. And a part of that process is electing who the workers would want to represent them. And we both were elected.
Yeah, and I think it's really important also to say that we, from day one, we didn't have these structures. It took us a good probably year and a half to get to the place where we were able to, kind of scope out that we really needed to develop these structures. How do you develop an organization? As workers, we've never formed a union before. And, Reverend Ryan brings a lot of transferable skills as a pastor. When I joined Amazon, I was a law student, and I decided to stay after graduating. So we kind of were able to kind of finagle something together. When I first joined back in August of 2022, we had one steering committee. So we were essentially one committee. in which the volunteers and the workers were the ones that were kind of moving the organization forward. And just through learning, we realized that that wasn't the best structure, that we needed, in order to be able to be a worker-led union, we needed the workers to have their own space. So from that, we sort of fused what we call now the community committee into one committee, which is our volunteer support committee. And then we started our organizing committee, which is the workers committee. Later on, we started noticing, okay, there's a lot of things that need to happen. The organizing committee and the volunteer committee can't really do anything. We need essentially somebody to handle the day-to-day operations of these committees. So that's when we decided, well, it's time to form an executive committee. Didn't really like the word executive committee, so we named it a steering committee. And that's when we formed our positions, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, held elections last August, and now we're here.
That's awesome. I love that, like growing and just like learning as you go. And I think, you know, also just touches on so many things going on in the labor movement with like, you know, the fight for, you know, one member, one vote in UAW, and yeah, just like the question of like, what is the structure of our unions? So are the workers at the North Carolina Cause campaign in touch with the organizers at other facilities that have gone public? I think the ones that stand out the most is, you know, JFK 8 with ALU, and then KCBG in Northern Kentucky that's organizing?
I would go as far as to say, to answer that question, that there are more organizing committees that are on the ground than what the general public actually realizes. We have workers from all across the Carolinas that reach out to us, but to specifically answer your question, yes, RWDSU, Jennifer Bates, they have been a strong encouragement and inspiration at the beginning of our organizing efforts. Just this past weekend, Chris Smalls was supposed to fly to town, but Connor and what's the young man's name? Dr. Bremer. They flew to town where we hosted their documentary about their historic win. And we're constantly talking to other OCs and organizations that are fighting Amazon throughout the country.
Yeah, I think it's also something that Rev said. I don't know if the general public really knows really the extent of Amazon organizing. I don't know if you've ever seen that image of the iceberg, right? That you can see the tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot of stuff underneath the water. That really is what Amazon is right now. People on the ground right now at Amazon are done. Not a lot of people can go into our fulfillment centers, into our facilities, because they only allow Amazon workers in there. But you can tell that there is something really going on. And I think we've been feeling this since like 2020. I used to live in Peru. That's where I was born, and we have earthquakes over there. And every time that an earthquake's about to come, you feel that there's just something off. Like there's some tension in the air, and I feel like that's what a lot of people feel since like around 2020. Something is off. There is something that's about to pop, and we as workers on the ground, we're seeing that. I mean, very, very, very clearly. And for the general public that might be feeling something, it's very real. It's not fake. It really is happening. And it's not just in the country that there's Amazon organizing committees that are talking to each other and that are forming, but across the entire continent.
Yeah, and like you guys being out and so visible makes you sort of like people treat you as a point of reference, and both just like watching interviews like this one or reaching out and getting advice. So
if I can add in there too, I think that when people see those of us who are organizing that's very public, regardless of if that's in Kentucky, North Carolina, Alabama, New York, for me at least, in my experiences with talking to workers every single day, they see us as hope. Hope that their tomorrows are going to change, hope that we can make a difference at Amazon.
Yeah, and just to put even a finer point on it, I mean, your demands that are on your website, and I think they're also in your leaflet that you, or your newsletter that you distribute, $30 an hour, 180 hours paid time off, and longer breaks seem to echo the demands that we see at JFK 8 and KCBG. And I think, it's powerful to be able to have common, concrete demands for union drives at a multinational corporation like Amazon, where the bosses are determined to isolate and atomize us all, no matter what basis they can do that on, country of national origin, state of origin, race, whatever. So, the fact that you have shared demands, could you talk a little bit about how that process happens?
You want to go for it?
Sure. I think part of it is, being aware of each other's movements. I think a bigger part is that we all really do have the same concerns. And I think that's really going to highlight the fact that, for a lot of people, $30 an hour might seem like a big ask. Because, one of the biggest things that we always hear about our organizing is, y'all are making between $16 and $19 an hour. What more could you want? But I would respectfully ask those people, all they have to do is work 1 month at Amazon and make $16 an hour, $19 an hour. It's 2024. That amount of money doesn't get you anywhere. We have people within our own organizing committee that live in their cars. We have people that have 3 jobs. There are people that can't come to our meetings because of these things. All you have to do is think about it a little bit, right? Like in North Carolina, you need a car to get places. That is a loan, that is gas money, rent. You're not gonna get anything for under $1,000 a month. And that's gonna be a crappy place for $1,000 a month. There are so many responsibilities that people have in 2024 that, it's impossible to live off of anything under $20 an hour. And all you have to do is just experience it. The other day I went to the grocery store. We have Food Lion in North Carolina. And I got a little tub of coffee, like McDonald's coffee, so nothing fancy here, and a bag of cat food. That was $28. $28 for 2 items. That's more than an hour's work. You know what I mean? So really our demands are just very, very basic humanity. And I think the fact that we're seeing this in so many different organizing committees, it really shows that what we are asking for is not a Lamborghini, it's not a penthouse, it's just basic human needs. And for us to be able to meet that with 1 full-time job, I don't really think that that's too much to ask for.
And if I could add another point with what Brother Idolo just shared. A couple years ago, I spoke at a Uni Global conference in Atlanta, Georgia. There I had the opportunity to meet Amazon workers from other parts of the world, to sit down, break bread with them, have conversations. Out of that Atlanta trip, something came out of that made perfect sense with having conversations with those workers. It didn't matter if that worker was a worker in Poland or if that worker was a worker in Brazil. The one common theme that emerged was that Amazon uses the exact same playbook. Not only do they use the exact same playbook, but the grievances, the issues, the problems, the racism, the discrimination, all of that is not just to one warehouse. It's widespread. So when we were talking about our demands, it would make perfect sense that if a lot of us are facing the same challenges as warehouse workers with our colleagues and our comrades in Kentucky, Bessemer, or in New York, we all should have the same voice with the same demands.
And if I could add one thing on that, I think it's important to also realize the historical context of where we're at right now. Amazon is one of the largest corporate empires in the history of the world.
They're like the largest employer after the Chinese and U.S. armies, right? Like I think
Yes.
that they're third in the globe.
And even if we're just talking land-based, right? Like the ancient Roman Empire was, the Mediterranean. The Inca Empire was South America. Amazon spans Canada, the entire United States, Mexico, Brazil. Hop on over to, all of these places in the former Roman Empire. You're going into the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, China, Japan, Turkey. So you're just making the round. This is a global empire. And in order to be able to take these folks on, the workers, if we're trying to actually bargain with this huge empire, we need to come together. We need to have a unified voice. And one of the beautiful things that we're seeing, like we saw with ALU, like we're seeing with KCVG, like we saw with Bessemer, we all have different organizing styles. There are some people that want to affiliate with a larger union. There are some people that don't. There are some people that want to be worker-led. And having this beautiful mosaic of organizing joining together as one voice, even if we do have different organizing styles, that can be a very powerful thing to make sure that we win our demands.
So you talked about Amazon has one playbook, right? So something that we've heard a lot from KCBG workers when we've interviewed them is about the relentless illegal union busting that they face, with including retaliatory firings, captive audience meetings, attempts to intimidate immigrant and non-native English-speaking workers. Have you guys seen that playbook? And if so, how do you respond?
I'll let the lawyer start.
Yeah. So when it comes to discrimination against native speaking or non-native speaking, non-English speaking folks, we have a lot of folks in at least RDU1 and Garner that don't speak English. As I mentioned before, I'm from Peru, so I do a lot of the stuff with our Hispanic organizing committee. And there is very real targeting that is happening against our Hispanic siblings at RDU1. There are people that have been fired simply because they approach HR and they don't speak the language. When other workers try to translate, they stop you from doing so. There are very real discriminatory things that occur when it comes to HR that a lot of Hispanics feel that they are targeted. And we had our Hispanic organizing committee maybe about a month ago, and it was almost an hour and a half of just example after example after example of people being discriminated against simply because of who they are. And the most horrible thing that we're seeing is that there are rumors being spread inside of that warehouse that we know is coming from a source in management that's trying to divide Black and brown workers, that's trying to divide African Americans and Latinos, because they know that if we are divided, they can conquer us. But what we're trying to do is reach out and dispel all of these rumors. They're lying about saying that we are paying people to wear shirts. They're lying about saying that we get paid to be officers in the union. How much do we get paid? Goose egg. I manage our some of our treasury right now. I can open up our treasury and show you that we don't pay anybody. But there are rumors floating around in order to, create these kinds of divisions between races. And talking about global empires, we've seen this happen before with all kinds of different empires that try to quell revolts and that try to quell rebellions. All you got to do is create division between them. So we see these very real things that come from management, and likely they're coming from these folks right behind us.
Yeah.
I think another way to answer that question, Idolo, is that a lot of the union busting tactics that we witness or that we have witnessed, we already knew what to expect. A part of our organizing efforts, we took the time last year to do extensive research on how Idolo was saying about empires. How are empires formed? How do they crash? We studied armies. We studied the NLRB. What do you call those?
Their rulings.
Yeah, their rulings. We read their rulings. What Amazon said and what they didn't say. So a lot of that we already had anticipated, and it's just a part of the journey with organizing, that they will indeed, by any means necessary, protect their power and their profit.
So yeah, the discrimination against non-English speakers at KCBG, I think one of the things we've seen that's been a really powerful counterbalance to that was this March on the Boss. And it wasn't, just the French-speaking workers. It was white workers. It was African workers together, bringing the signatures, demanding translation. And so, yeah, I think in terms of, as you said, we know what their playbook is. What's Cause's playbook to, not just defense but offense against these union busting tactics?
Yeah. So we have a very clear strategic plan as to how we are going to go on the offensive. For obvious strategic reasons, we can't divulge too much.
Yeah.
But as Rev was saying, we took the last year, which was 2023, to really step back and try to just learn. How can we learn about failures, right? How can we learn about successes? What has worked against Amazon? What has worked against other corporations? What has worked against empires, right? formed a strategic plan, and really what we're trying to do is be able to force Amazon to the bargaining table in a way where we can win these demands through a legal action. And obviously, that is, we're trying to do an NLRB election. And we have a very specific plan as to how we are going to get to that NLRB election. So we're hoping to be able to concentrate all of our power and all of our forces toward being able to get that NLRB election at some point in the near future and be able to negotiate these changes via contract.
And if I could add some examples for your audience too about the early stages of our organizing efforts, how they union bus. The day that they decided that they're just going to do these random drug testing, they chose our VP, Brother Albert, former VP, has multiple amputations, requires a lot of pain medication, and they terminated him for a substance that was in his body that he was prescribed by his doctor. It hurt Albert so bad that he didn't want to fight it anymore. He was tired of fighting them. I've had managers lie on me. So one of the things we send, one of the playbooks that we see is that their painting division, they paint me as a racist. I hate, they paint me as someone who hates white people, Hispanic people, and only fight for black people. And if anyone really genuinely knew me, and even if you knew my background, the church that I once pastored, I baptized more white people than I could ever remember. You understand? So those are some of the divisions that they use. And then if you take our current VP, I think this is her third round in 2 years fighting cancer. She's 70 years old. And by all accounts, she shouldn't be working. But because she hasn't produced enough wealth in her lifetime, she has to work. And this 70-year-old woman who's been fighting cancer, you try to send her to a department, that you know that she's gonna fail in. And that's why we fight Amazon so hard. And and it's been amazing too, and I'm sorry to get emotional, but I'm very passionate about this. It's been quite the experience too, watching Amazon change policies, watching them tweet just something just very small. To the average worker, oh, that's just whatever. But when you put on your organizing cap, you see why they are making these changes. And even at one point in time, because I'm just up in your face type of Negro, you know, I don't care who you are. I'm confrontational, I'm up in your face. I used to love to stand out at the very front of the entrance as workers are coming out. It gave me the opportunity to clown our general managers, to pick at them, to record them, all that good stuff. Lo and behold, next thing you know, they have the police right there. Now I work in this building. I've been in there 10 hours, 12 hours. I wasn't a threat while I was in there, but now all of a sudden I'm a threat where you feel like you have to protect the safety of your workers, and I'm the threat. And so you have the police that's literally right there.
So I want to draw more on this connection of, and thank you for sharing those really, like, I think concrete examples, but the connection between like English-speaking and Spanish-speaking workers, this comes out, I think, in your agitational newsletter, which you produce in English and Spanish, which I think is like a excellent counter argument to these lies that we're hearing from management. And just as someone who's also from the South, I can't help but think how many union busting efforts we've seen at the Smithfield Ham operation. So like the plight of Latino workers in the South is like intimately tied up with everything that you guys are doing. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the goals you have are with this newsletter that you put out, and like how much of a base for it do you have in your facility?
Yeah, and for this, I first need to call out the person that created the newsletter, who is our communications person, Destiny Blackwell. She is and one of our most incredible organizers down at RDU1. And what we originally wanted to do with that newsletter, or what her vision was exactly what you said, right? We don't have a voice right now to be able to rebut all of these lies that Amazon says about us. So let's create this voices of empowerment kind of thing. And really, it's been the biggest audience has really been workers inside of the warehouse. It's really one of the biggest ways that we get the word out as to what we're doing. And like I mentioned before, we have our community committee, who is our amazing group of volunteers. Every couple of weeks, they go and flyer outside at shift change and hand out these things to people in their cars. And people are so receptive to this newsletter because we talk about very real things. The other day, we were just hanging out outside during our very short breaks, by the way, but we can get into that in a little bit. And we were hanging out by the car. And just as a normal occurrence, we see somebody getting stretchered out and put into an ambulance. This is a very normal occurrence. The other day in Singles Pack, where Rev works, a pregnant woman fainted and had to be stretchered out. These are just examples from this year.
And it's not even summer yet.
It's not even summer yet. Last year, I mean, there's been so many instances of people getting hurt on the job. I've been hit in the head by a box before, bleeding all over the place, and just got to keep going. So these are the types of things that we're trying to elevate, that we're trying to show in the Voices of Empowerment newsletter. Back during Cyber Monday, we had one article that was called Amazon's Crimes, and we had photos of everybody that has died inside of an Amazon warehouse, that has lost their lives inside of an Amazon warehouse. So we're not talking about, things that, we're just making up here, things that, we're just trying to pick a fight. We have people that are literally losing their lives inside of these warehouses. There was a person in Ohio, I think it was Ohio, I don't know if it was earlier this year or late in 2023. He was like 20 years old, died. What was the payout by Amazon? $7,000 to his family. Well, what are we talking about here, right? So this is why we need to have a voice, and that's what Voices of Empowerment is trying to serve.
You indicated, talking about how, people go and hand out copies of this newsletter in the community, and that these are volunteers who support you. I mean, I think for us, it's kind of shocking to me. Like when we table, just you stop person after person after person, and they totally understand the need to unionize Amazon, and they see that they have a role to play in that. I wonder if, beyond just like this sort of core of incredible organizers that you have supporting cause directly, like ordinary people, like viewers of Worker Strike Back's On Strike show, like what can ordinary people do to support the fight to unionize Amazon?
The first thing I'd like to point out is that we're all ordinary people. I understand your point. I understand your point. We are ordinary workers who are taking on the fight of a lifetime against Amazon. One of the ways that your viewers could help out is, first and foremost, we have a GoFundMe page. We're fighting a company, a corporation that has unlimited amounts of money. What we do, it does require money. Even if that donation is $2 or $3, it goes a very long way. The second part is that if you have relatives or friends that are in the Carolinas, have them to go to our website, reach out to us, because we can definitely find ways that they can help organize Amazon being on the outside. And is there anything that you may want to add?
Yeah, I would concur on helping us build our war chest. I think that is enormous. And like I mentioned before, we don't get paid anything. We don't get paid salaries. That's not even a part of the plan. What we need is money to be able to take on this corporate behemoth. They have a huge team of lawyers that are going to, keep us in the courtrooms. They're going to sue us whenever they can. And we need to have the ability to be able to protect ourselves against that. Secondly, I think Rev did mention something about volunteers and people to reach out. I would say maybe if there are people that are listening from the South or specifically from North Carolina, if you are working McDonald's, if you are working, in other fast food places or any other low wage industries, go get a job at Amazon. Reach out to us, and we're gonna get you in there. Right now, really, what would be really great is to have a working class flood of people to just go in and get a job inside of RDU1. That would be wonderful.
All right.
And sometimes it's just little simple things. One of the challenges that we have now is that if one of your viewers is social media savvy, we have so much content. I'm talking about content that we could spend the next 40 days nonstop working on, that we need help with editing, and because we recognize that just like the newsletter creates a conversation, keeps us relevant with workers, what about that worker who didn't get a newsletter? If they're on social media, we still want our message to be able to get out, but we need help.
That's a lot of tasks. So yeah, I'm glad I asked that question. And yeah, I mean, you pointed to like other low wage work, whether that's McDonald's or the local Walmart. And then the reality is, I mean, especially in the South, but this whole country, right, that 9 out of 10 workers don't have a union. And I think increasingly people are drawing that conclusion that that's the tool they need to fight back against whoever their corporate behemoth is. So I think, what are some key lessons, if you had to say, that you guys have learned over the last 2 years to anyone who wants to organize their workplace, so that we can, push that number right in the other direction and raise the union density in this country?
My very first lesson that I learned, and this is particularly to Amazon workers, warehouse workers, we went public too quick. If I could turn back the hands of time, I would have convinced my comrades, like, hey, let's keep this on the down low and build, learn, watch, study, read. Don't go public too quick. And then the other lesson that I learned is that this work that we're doing, it requires passion. It requires love for humanity, hatred for inequality, mistreatment, discrimination, however those ugly things look. It requires all of that.
I would say that the biggest lesson that we can take from right now, 2024, the American labor movement and where it's at. This is a brand new leaf in the American labor movement. There has been great work that has been done in labor in the last century or so, but we are not in the 1900s anymore. We are in a time where technology has advanced so far, and the access to education around these things have evolved so far that workers are the subject matter experts inside of your own workplaces. So one of the things that when we first started, we felt really lost as to like, how do you start organizing? How do you even do this? And we were seeking out help from, all different kinds of places. And I would say that one of the biggest things that stops people from organizing is that belief in yourself. Workers are the subject matter experts when it comes to that. Organizing labor is not this crazy science. You are inside of your workplace every day. You have friendships inside of that place. All you gotta do is get those people together. It's a numbers game. If you know how to be friendly, if you know how to talk to people, if you can be inspiring, you're 75% of the way there.
Amen to that.
And I think also even some earlier lessons that we were drawing out of having those clear-cut demands of well, this is what we're fighting for, right? And so that can help draw people towards you. And I think even the newsletter to me is just such a key lesson of just putting our ideas out there so someone has access to them in the social media as well. So I think really, really useful lessons that you guys are drawing out. We've got a couple, like you said, there's this iceberg, right? We've got a couple of examples of Amazon organizing that have gone public. I think, JFK 8 is one that most people know. KCBG, I think is increasingly in the public eye. There's also, I think, the example of Bessemer. And I think, we have to talk about our wins and our setbacks. What would you guys see as kind of the lessons that were key to take away from the loss at Bessemer?
Well, to be very candid with you, I don't know if it's a loss yet because we're still waiting for the next ruling coming out of this board. But needless to say, when I was in high school, we played a football team called South Point. South Point, they whooped our ass real good. I'm talking about they beat the living crap out of us. That next week, our practice was different. The coach, he had us to study film, study more film, and study. We studied so much. I can remember just like it was yesterday, I fell asleep and they left me in there and everybody had went home. But the positive side of that, when we played South Point again and we met them in the playoffs, we returned the favor. Why? Because we had studied them so much and we had studied the lessons that we learned from our loss. So let's say that Bessemer did lose this second, where the verdict is still out. There are some unique lessons to be learned in that organizing drive. For me personally, I don't know what Idolo has to say. It was almost a reminder for me, and I may get in trouble for saying this, of why we're 100% grassroots, worker-led, and independent. As Idolo was alluding to earlier, you have all of these experts that come in that have never been inside of an Amazon facility, coaching you, trying to tell you how to organize your facility. What's crazy is that a lot of these institutions, they're still operating in the 19th century horse and buggy model. That building across there, they're in the what was that cartoon I watched as a kid? They're in the George Jetson. Yeah, they're in the 22nd, 23rd century, and like Idolo had mentioned, we are the experts of our workplace and of our coworkers. That's the lesson that I personally learned from Bessemer.
Yeah, I would completely agree, and I'll bring up another sports reference. I don't know if anybody knows what cauliflower ear is, but this is what a cauliflower ear is. Yeah, I was a wrestler when I grew up. I don't know if I ever showed you this, Rev.
Okay.
Yeah. So how does this thing happen? It just happens from years upon years of essentially wrestling another person, and your ear just kind of like it's just like a friction thing. And the biggest thing about wrestling is that a loss is actually a win, because from your losses, you're going to know what you need to fix in order to be able to win next time. And it's just like what Rev said. All of these losses that we've seen, this is a brand new burgeoning movement. We need to learn from one another. There have also been losses that ALU had after their great win that they had in JFK 8. Right now, they've lost the last two elections. Bessemer, the verdict is still out. They learned a lot from their first loss that was an enormous loss, and they closed the gap quite a lot. Now what we are doing is we're learning from all of these strategies and making sure that we have a strategic, scientific plan to be able to get us past the finish line by fixing those problems before we even get there. So I do think that, losses sometimes can be taken very, very hard, but I would encourage people that are trying to organize, if you do have a loss, don't use it as a defeat. Use it as a learning experience. We've had many defeats, but there's always this thing, you lose the battle, but you can still win the war, right? So that's exactly what we've been going through, right? Like we've lost many battles. We were not always an independent union. I will leave it at that. We became an independent union for a reason. We learned our lessons. And I do think that these different experimentations and the different organizing committees, if we're able to bring all of our lessons and our successes together, I think we're going to create the perfect model to be able to take on Amazon.
I love that. So it's like, know your enemy, and then, rest up and be ready for the next game, is what I'm kind of hearing between the two.
Right.
Spot on.
So I just have, one last question. I think as we've seen over the years, as Amazon organizing has gained momentum, we've used these flashpoints that Amazon themselves kind of hypes up. I mean, in part because they are dependent on hyper exploitation of the facilities, right? Whether that's Cyber Monday or Prime Week. And there's begun to be some discussion about a National Prime Week of Action this July, and I'm wondering, is Cause gonna be part of that?
I'll let you take that.
I think it would be very interesting. We had a Cyber Monday event last time. We hadn't heard about the Prime Week of Action, but I think it's something that we could definitely be a part of. I mean, we're always trying to look for allies and to be able to join up with other movements. We've been with Make Amazon Pay for a little bit. They're like this global coalition of folks that always does things around the Thanksgiving time and Black Friday time. So back in November, we had a ULP extension with the Palmdale drivers. So the Palmdale drivers were asking for to be recognized, and they essentially extended their picket line over to RDU1. And we had this beautiful West-East Coast sort of unity action outside of a fulfillment center. And we backed up, we were able to hold a line for maybe a couple of hours, but that backed up Amazon truck traffic because we threw them off completely for the entire day. So I think that there are really great ways that we could be able to disrupt Amazon and show them that we do have the power by joining with other Amazon movements.
And I also believe that that's what it's going to take is a collective group of organizations all working for the same goal and finding places that we can work together to organize, to apply maximum pressure to Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so for Workers Strike Back members, we asked them to go out for what we call our weeks of action, and maybe we have a rally. We've had a couple here at the Spheres, just to bring attention to what's happening and also to invite, other workers to engage in that. And it's really exciting to hear you talking about beyond the power of a rally, which can in itself be extremely energizing, but to actually have a picket line. And I mean, the reality of the labor movement over the last several decades is that picket line doesn't always mean stopping production. So like to hear that was actually disruptive to, Amazon's gorging profits that are constantly coming in. I think that that's just a really powerful example, and we have to lift up that kind of work that's happening, because I think that's those sort of lessons that we kind of have to point to of that's the only language they speak.
Yeah, and I will say on that point, I think to be able to get to that place, it's very important for Amazon workers. We need to know our worth. We are human, right? We deserve all of these things that we're asking for, because what we're asking for they're very basic things. We are born into a society where we have to enter the labor market in order to be able to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, put shelter over our heads. But if you really think about it, a labor market has a seller and a buyer, right? We are the seller, Amazon is the buyer. What are we selling? Our bodies. But it's crazy to think that we in the former British and Spanish colonies don't have a say in the price of our own bodies. We don't have a say in the price or even the conditions of our own bodies. That's all we're asking for. We're asking for Amazon to sit in front of the table with us and us to be able to say, hey, this is what we think that we are worth, because we walk an average of 22 miles a day. We are the ones that get hit in the head and bleed out all over the place. We are the ones that are pregnant and are fainting all over the place. We're the ones that are getting stretchered out in order to get your packages delivered within 24 hours. And to me, that's a source of pride. We are the ones that get people packages within 24 hours. That's an amazing thing. But all we're asking for is that we get paid fairly and that we can at least be able to signify our worth to our employer. And, our employee manual is called the owner's manual. So that, so
that most people have never read.
Yeah, and that kind of signifies, right? You ask yourself that question, who's the owner and what do they own?
Yeah.
Are we the owners of the company?
Yeah.
Because if we are, we say, okay, great. We want to be the owners of the company, but pay us what we deserve. But then on the other hand, if Amazon is the owners, what do they own? Do they own us?
You better
Then
preach,
that
man.
becomes an issue, right?
Yes, sir.
And we have to push back on that.
Yes, sir.
Getting a sense, and I kind of want to ask a question. So, Worker Strike Back is not a socialist organization, but I myself am a socialist, and we talk about we live in a society where we have to go out and sell our labor, and that we don't get to determine the conditions and the cost of that. I mean, that's why I fight for a fundamentally different society. I mean, obviously that's beyond the scope necessarily of unionizing this facility, but I think like when we look at the conditions of whether it's, you talked about organizing with these Amazon workers who are fighting against climate change, want climate justice. I mean, I don't see any way in which we get climate justice under a capitalist system that's run for profit. Well, it's profitable to, sell fossil fuels and those kinds of things. I kind of, this talk of empire and like the kind of society we live in, I'm curious, just kind of if either of you want to speak at all on sort of your political views on kind of the kind of society that workers can and should have.
I was asked that question. It's funny you raised that question. Recently, Idolo and I guess that was a documentary back in October when I just got back from the Bahamas. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But one of the interviewers asked me a similar question. The question was, what would the perfect world look like for me? And I was just kind of lost for a second. And I've had the time now to give that some thought. Politically, I don't have a label. I'm an independent voter, but to be very honest with you, I don't give two shits with voting for a Democrat or a Republican, because in my eyes, they both serve this evil monster capitalism. So like, who do you want to vote for it? But for me, a type of perfect world, a perfect workplace for workers and those of us even that live here in America, is truly 100% democratic, where we really genuinely have a vote and a voice that matters.
For me, this is a great question. So we come from the South. We're both church folk here.
Catholic and Baptist.
Yep. Rev comes from, the black tradition. I come from the Hispanic tradition, and
socialist traditions in both of those.
Yes,
yeah, and
100%.
And I come from specifically the Franciscan tradition of Catholicism, which is, you take your vow of poverty and you just fight for justice in the world. So really, for me, a political label, I haven't really felt called to embrace anything other than that Franciscan Catholicism, because I feel like that does kind of put me in my cultural sort of history. And I think that really fits my viewpoint of the world. I'm also an independent politically, like Rev. And I think that's also kind of a thing about North Carolina. If you go into like voter registration in North Carolina, we have a lot of independence. Like, people don't really want to take a political party side. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think for me, what I see in our workplace, this really is a conversation not really about left versus right. This is a conversation about those who are being fucked and those who are fucking us. I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now, where we have people that support Donald Trump that support our union, and we welcome them. We have people that are, ideologically socialist or communist, and they support our union. We have people that are capitalists that support our union. We have people that are independents, that are Democrats, that are Republicans, libertarians, Green Party. Whatever it is that you have that support our union. So this really is, I think, a broader repudiation of really the place and time where we're at. I don't think that anybody can walk around in America right now and say that it's not collapsing and say that it's not unraveling. And I think we really are the people on the ground that are seeing the cracks on the ground form. And it really is our responsibility to make sure that we can change it, and that we can also raise our voice to let everybody know, yes, this is happening. And the beautiful thing in 2024 is that that workers are the ones that are leading the way.
And if I may add to what Idolo said, one of the reasons I think that we have such a unique and diverse demographic from 18, the oldest worker that I've talked to is 82 years old, is that everything that Idolo said, this two-party system, it's always funny to hear either a politician on either side of the aisle talk about what the American people want. You understand? And to to cast a net and to reach that many people from so many diverse backgrounds, it shows that something is fundamentally wrong in our country. And in my humble opinion, I share this quite often, I genuinely believe that right now as we speak, that we're living in a Gilded Age 2.0. And what we've seen our ancestors in the past, how they responded to the Gilded Age, we have to fight back.
This spheres over here. I don't know if you know that inside there's a very fancy greenhouse with exotic plants. Of course, in a city where we have the highest rate of homelessness in the country, so that Gilded Age connection absolutely stands out to me.
One of our comrades here at Oxfam had already said something. I had already noticed this, and then when she said it, it just made me very angry. I went like in an Incredible Hulk mode. You're over here passing out bananas. Free bananas. Two things wrong with that picture. One, at Amazon, we as a warehouse worker, we don't get free bananas. We don't get free nothing.
Free coffee, maybe.
And a banana is something that's fresh. It's organic. You go to our break rooms, very few items that you can get that may be like fresh fruit. But the other issue here, all of this wealth, this power that I see, and if you just go a few blocks down, you have unhoused, you have folks who have mental health crises. I don't see any of them getting a banana, or do they have free bananas in wherever they're located? That just shows you, again, that there's something fundamentally wrong in this country with the income inequality.
Yeah.
Something that you both said that I want to draw on is you both identified as independent, and you don't hear that very often, or I don't know, more and more all the time. But on strike and Worker Strike Back, we've been supporting the uncommitted movement, we're sort of like writing in opposition to Biden, but we've been pointing kind of past where the main organizers of that campaign have been pointing to, which will largely probably capitulate to quote unquote lesser evilism in voting for Biden in November. And we say, yeah, kind of what you guys have already said, that neither of those parties represent working class people. Neither of them are going to fight for a ceasefire. Neither of them are going to raise the minimum wage to $25 an hour. None of them are passing Medicare for all. And what we need, is a party that does fight for those things, that actually is of, by, and for working class people. And just be kind of curious on, I think we often hear like that's not possible, or that's, you guys are doing the impossible, you're taking on Goliath, I think is the way it's often framed. So like for the people who are taking on Goliath, is it possible to build a new party in this country?
Okay, so you just hit a nerve. Remember, I'm a preacher.
Yeah.
So I don't like the term when people, and this, I get it, and it's not nothing to you, when people say it's a Goliath versus a David situation. Now, remember, I'm a preacher, so when I hear that, my theological training kicks in. I think that that's exegetically incorrect, and it's a hermeneutical error.
Okay.
Because as a person of faith, what I realize is that hell with a Goliath. It don't matter how big that Goliath is over there. That Goliath is not more powerful than ordinary people that's sitting at this table right now. And until ordinary people realize that, hey, you are the ones that really have the power. You are the ones that can make the changes that you want. Nothing much is going to change. But to answer your question, absolutely. Do I see that there could be possibly a workers' party in this country one day? Sitting at this table with you young people, that gives me hope for tomorrow. That's something that we're fighting for. And so I absolutely see that is a reality, because at the end of the day, and I know this from my own experience with church folk and with family, people are tired of the two-party system. It is an absolute failure. And then specifically for Black people, they've stopped believing the lies that the Democratic Party tells.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with Rev's assessment. I do think that it's also important to talk about, why is it that the two-party system is such a failure? And I think it just requires a really quick sort of view of the legal landscape. First of all, what are the two parties and why are they there? Let's just think about it a little bit. Political parties, all you have to do is go back to the Wilding decision, Wilding versus DNC. This happened, I think, in 2021, I believe. So what the Wilding decision showed is that political parties are corporations, right? They are corporations that actually have a heightened privilege than regular corporations. So the Democratic Party of the United States and the Republican Party of the United States are incorporated. What does incorporation mean? Comes from the word Latin corpus. What does corpus mean? Body. Incorporation, the birthing of a new body, right? So these are legal people under American law, right? So now let's think about what political parties actually are. These are two individuals who don't pay taxes, who are sovereign people, and who have the power to decide who makes it on the ballot and who does not. So this is really where the issue is. We ask ourselves why people other than the Democrats and the Republicans can't make it onto the ballot. And it's because two people control who makes it onto our public ballot. Two people control through the Board of Elections, through our laws, which create the Board of Elections. In the state of North Carolina, who appoints the Board of Elections? It's the heads of the political parties, right? That are then ratified by the governor, who is elected by the political parties. So it's all a circular argument here. So when we realize that we don't necessarily live in a democracy, we don't even live in a republic anymore, we live in a place that is controlled by two people. That is no different than the diarchy of ancient Sparta. So what was the distinction between the ancient Roman Republic and the ancient empire? People still voted during the Republic. People still voted during the Empire. The distinction was that the Emperor Augustus controlled who made it on the ballot by appointing a committee of people that were going to decide who made it on the ballot. It's very, very clear what we have here. We don't have a democracy. We don't have a republic. We have descended back into kingdom. And I think the system has broken. And I think the two-party system can't last anymore. It's inevitable, in my opinion, that something will come. And the question that I'm asking myself is, why do political parties have to have control of the public ballot? Could there be another way of making sure that we are getting candidates for office that does not include political parties? I think that could be something that should be discussed.
Well, I've taken about an hour of your time and gone way beyond the scope of the questions I told you I was
No,
going to ask.
we've enjoyed
but
this.
I
Yeah,
this
thought
is
it was
great.
a really good conversation, and I really appreciated, both of you so much. And I know if I'm getting cold, then you two must be freezing.
Oh, we're
I've been
freezing
over
over
here
here. I'm
shaking.
shivering
Hey,
over
can you
here
get
the whole
a
time.
picture?
We want to thank Reverend Brown and Italo for speaking with us and giving us insight into their fight with Amazon in North Carolina at the RDU1 facility. This weekend, union activists from around the country, including those trying to organize at Amazon, will be coming together at Labor Notes, an annual nationwide meeting of union activists. Among the discussions that will take place is what will it take to unionize this trillion-dollar corporation. We know that one of the proposals being brought there from workers at KCVG in Kentucky is for a united week of action starting on Amazon Prime Day in mid-July this year. Workers Strike Back is helping organize this week of action to support the fight to unionize Amazon. If you want to join the fight by passing a resolution in your union to support the Amazon Prime Week of Action in mid-July, check out the description below for a model resolution. You can also keep an eye on our events page for rallies and other events in your city. This can be an important step in helping to bring together these different worker struggles at Amazon and help coordinate and connect them.
If you've watched On Strike before, you'll know that we provide an analysis from the point of view of working class people about the problems we face in our daily lives under capitalism. In every episode, On Strike also presents a strategy for working class movements to fight back. On Strike talks about why it's crucial that every fight for change emphasizes the need to build working class solidarity and is linked with organizing a powerful challenge to the political establishment and the capitalist system itself. This is something you won't find on mainstream media. That's why we need your support for On Strike. Subscribe to our On Strike channel on YouTube and like this video and become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to organize to rebuild a fighting labor movement. By becoming a Worker Strike Back member, you can also help this broadcast. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workerstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. Solidarity.